When you manage a team of people, you can't always ensure that they will get along. Given the different competing interests, different needs, and different agendas, you might even have two people who intensely disagree most of the time. But why do disagreements at work happen? Let us look at the following types of team conflicts and disagreements. They are very common to workplace environments. The first ones are the personality clashes. These types of conflicts are caused by differences in personalities among team members. You are not always going to get along with or like every person you meet, whether they are your co-workers, your supervisors, or your peers. And it can be challenging to work with someone whose personality type disagrees with your own. The second one is the task-based conflict. And they occur in situations when team members rely on each other to complete a task or project. When one person on the team doesn't complete their part of the task, it can affect another team member's ability to finish their part on time. For example, if an employee always submits their reports late, it may cause the finance team to be late with their reports as well. The third one is the leadership conflict. Some conflicts occur because of the differences in leadership styles. Everyone has their own way of leading their teams. Some leaders are directive, while others are more open, inclusive, and they encourage collaboration with their teams. If you are in a management role, you should be aware of your own leadership style. The fourth one are the work style conflicts. Just as there are differences in leadership styles, there are differences in work styles as well. And work style conflicts occur because team members have different preferences on how to accomplish tasks. Some work quickly and move on to the next task as soon as possible, while others prefer to complete tasks slowly and mindfully. Some people are self-starters who require little to no direction to finish a task, and others need guidance at every step of the way. Unresolved disagreements and conflicts at your workplace can impact productivity, performance, morale, work environment, and that means putting the time, strategy, and effort to resolve disagreements and conflicts is absolutely necessary. So in this video, we will discuss the various ways that you can resolve disagreements or conflicts at your workplace, and that too in a step-by-step and systematic manner. Because your goal as a team leader or team manager is to ensure that disagreements and conflicts on a particular issue are resolved permanently and not just through a temporary quick fix. Also, you need to ensure that you develop your team to resolve such conflicts through a personal one-on-one without having to involve the boss every time. It saves your time as a boss and also helps build a collaborative work environment. Friends, through this channel we help people and companies grow and succeed, and we help them find solutions to their business and career issues. Please like the video so that it stays with you for your future reference, and also subscribe to our channel to continue accessing content that will help you grow, succeed, and win at your workplace and at your business. When a disagreement erupts between two people on your team, it might be tempting to jump in and impose a decision on them. While this may certainly be the fastest and probably the least painful way to the resolution, it won't help your team members figure out how to resolve disagreements and conflicts on their own. So what's your role as the manager or the boss in a situation like this? Should you get involved or leave them to solve their own problems? It is better as a manager to rely on your mediation skills, not your authority. The first step of playing the role of mediator is to understand both of their positions, what one is claiming and the other is rejecting, and their interests. why they are making or rejecting their respective claims. You can do this in a joint meeting with both the parties or in separate meetings. So decide whether to initially meet with the parties together or separately. Both of the approaches have their pros and cons. The goal of the initial meeting is to have them leave with their emotions cooled off and feeling respected by you, if not by each other initially. With that done, you then want to focus on getting their positions, interests, and priorities out on the table. Throughout the process, encourage them to take responsibility for moving towards an agreement. Ideally, you will be able to coach your colleagues to talk to each other and resolve their conflict without involving you, making clear that their disagreement is harmful to them and to the organization. But that's not always possible. In these situations, it's important to intervene not as a boss, but as a mediator. To be sure, you won't be a neutral, independent mediator since you have some stake in the outcome, but you're likely to be more effective in meeting everybody's interests, yours, theirs, and the organization's, if you use your mediation skills rather than your authority. A question may now come to your mind. Why rely on mediation and not your authority? It is because your colleagues are more likely to own the decision and follow through with it if they are involved in making it. If you dictate what they should do, they will have learned nothing about resolving conflict themselves. Rather, they will have become more dependent on you to figure out their disputes for them. There will be times when you will have to put aside your mediator role and decide how the conflict will be resolved. For example, if major departmental or company policy issues are involved, there is imminent danger, or all other avenues have failed to resolve the conflict, but those occasions are few and far between. So what if your colleagues expect you to step in as the boss? Here your first move is to recognize your authority but explain the mediation process you have in mind. You might tell your colleagues that although you have the authority to impose an outcome on them, you hope that together you can find a resolution that works for everyone. You could also tell them that when the three of you are together, they should devote their energy to reaching agreement rather than trying to persuade you on which of their views should prevail. Is it better to meet with each colleague separately or jointly? See, there are pros and cons to both the approaches. The goal is to understand both of their positions, what one is claiming and the other one is rejecting, and their interests, why they are making those claims and then rejecting those claims. Conflict or disagreement often carries with it a heavy dose of emotion. One or both of your colleagues may be seriously angry. One or both may feel intimidated by the other. Meeting with each other separately will give the angry colleague an opportunity to vent, give you a chance to reassure the intimidated colleague that you will listen, and may surface information ultimately useful to resolving the conflict. And it may reveal information that colleagues either haven't shared with each other or haven't paid attention to. From my experience, I can tell you that initial separate meetings are more successful if the manager spends time building empathy and gaining an understanding of the problem. There will be plenty of time in subsequent meetings to talk about how to resolve the conflict or disagreement. Also be sure in this initial meeting that you are using empathy. Empathy communicates that must have been really hard for you, and not sympathy, which communicates I feel sorry for what you have been through. An expression of empathy is respectful but relatively neutral, and it does not imply support for the other person's position. The risk in starting separately is that each colleague may think that the other one is going to use that meeting to sway you to the other's perspective. You can avoid this by explaining that the purpose of the meeting is to understand both sides of what is going on, not for you to form an opinion on who is right and who is wrong. Meeting jointly at first has its pluses too. Giving each a chance to do some controlled venting in a joint session may clear the air between them. You should check with both before proposing this approach, since you want to be sure that they can engage in a session without losing their composure. Otherwise, the resolution may become even more difficult. And be sure to set some ground rules. Each will have a turn, no interruptions for example, before you begin, and be prepared to tightly control the session and even break it off if you cannot control it, otherwise it can turn brutal. Another good reason to have your colleagues meet together is that ultimately they need to own the resolution of their conflict, and they need to develop the ability to talk to each other when future conflicts arise. Of course, the risk in meeting jointly is that you cannot control the process and the meeting only escalates the conflict. Keep in mind that you don't have to pick one mode of meeting and stick with it throughout the process. You can switch between the modes. My experience suggests that starting separately and building empathy and then moving to a joint meeting is more effective in resolving conflict than starting jointly and then meeting separately. What should you accomplish in your first meeting? Whether you are meeting together or not, there are several things you want to do in the initial meeting. Explain that you see your role as helping and then finding a mutually acceptable resolution to the conflict, but also to ensure that the resolution does not have negative implications for the team or for the organization. Make it clear that deciding whether a particular agreement is acceptable requires their buy-in and yours as well, and then set out some rules for whenever you meet together. For example, treat each other with respect and don't interrupt. So, the goal of the initial meeting is to have them leave with emotions cooled off and feeling respected by you, if not yet by each other. With that done, you can then bring them together if you didn't meet jointly the first time, and then focus on getting the information that you all need in order to resolve the conflict. Now let's talk about the information you need to draw out in subsequent meetings. In order to resolve the conflict, you need to know from both people their positions, what each wants, their interests, why each is taking that particular position, how the position reflects their needs and concerns, and their priorities, that is, what is more and less important to each and why. You can gather this information by doing several things. For example, asking why or why not. Questions to uncover the interests that underlie their positions, listening carefully to identify those interests, reformulating what you think you understand about one colleague's interest to make sure you understand that the other colleague also is hearing them. There are some pitfalls that you will have to avoid here, and there are several ways that these discussions can go wrong. For one, either colleague has to try to convince you that their view of the facts is the only correct view, that their position is the right one, or that they should prevail because they have more power. We call these facts rights and power arguments, and they are detrimental because they distract everyone from seeking a resolution that will satisfy everyone's interests. The facts argument is an interesting one. Both colleagues may have been at the same scene, but each remembers it in a different way. They both think that if they could only convince you and their colleague of their view of the facts, the conflict would be over. The problem is that even if you had been there, it is counterproductive to try to convince others of your view, because without new credible information, they are unlikely to change their minds about what happened. So the best approach to closing this trap is to agree to disagree and move on. How can you move forward towards an agreement? Finding potential settlements may be easy if in the process of helping your colleagues, they understand their different positions and interests, and it also becomes clear that this conflict was just a misunderstanding or that there is a way forward that respects both the parties' interests. If it becomes apparent that their interests are as much in conflict as their positions, finding a settlement may be more difficult, but don't give up yet. There are several ways to facilitate an agreement in this situation as well. Surprisingly often, parties can simply agree on how they are going to interact or address the issues in the future. They can put the past behind them, accepting that past practice wasn't working for one or the other or both, and move forward together. This can be tricky though. Sometimes one might be willing to engage in a future-based agreement like this but not trust the other to follow through it. If there is still no settlement at this point, you may need to shed your mediator role now, and now as the boss, impose an outcome that is in the best interests of the organization. Be sure to explain your reasoning and make it clear that this isn't your desired path. You might also point out that your goal in having them work hard in resolving the dispute on their own was so that they could be better equipped to do so in the future, and that goal hasn't been fully accomplished. But don't let them walk away thinking that their relationship is forever strained. Give them both feedback on what they might do differently next time, making it clear that when they get to loggerheads again, you'll expect them to manage it on their own. Hope you found this useful, and the learnings can equip you with managing and resolving disagreements and conflicts at the workplace effectively. Please give us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't done already. Our goal is to help you grow and succeed, and we post useful content every day. Thanks for watching.